We are thrilled to be joined today by Kris Kasianovitz, Library Director at UC Berkeley's Institute of Governmental Studies. Her work spans government information, web archiving, data management, and social science research support. She brings a deep expertise in connecting people with public sector information systems and strengthening data literacy across academic policy and public audiences. So let's dive in, and Kris, the screen is yours.
Welcome to Accessing California State and Local Data. And I have data in quotes, and you'll see why and hopefully understand why by the end of this presentation. I am the director at the Institute of Governmental Studies Library. I have been a state and local government information librarian for nigh on 25 plus years. So I'm coming to you with expertise over many years, a lot of it just kind of trial and error and learning on the job and learning as I go, working with researchers and the general public in trying to access this type of information. I've started us off with a wonderful map here on this opening slide from 1891. It's a California mineralogical and geological map. And I thought it's a great way to sum up, how you can get access to statistics, historical statistics, that are both, it's a digitized version of a print map. And so this to me kind of just epitomizes what it's like to search for and find and get access to state and local government information. So hopefully that becomes even clearer as we move through the slides. So we've got a pretty packed agenda. I'm going to go through our takeaways and session outcomes. It is important to cover data terminology. I feel that about 65% of looking for, finding, and accessing data is actually having an understanding of what data and statistics are and how they're created and collected. So we're going to spend the first portion of the session kind of going through all of this. And I feel it's also my duty as a librarian, as a government information librarian, to help kind of frame all of that for you as you, begin or continue on your various data quests. And so it really doesn't matter if you're a member of the general public, if you're a seasoned researcher, if you're a student, if you're a parent, wherever you're at. The information I'm going to, go over with you, everybody should have access to this. And I feel that it's really key to help you as just an engaged citizen and an engaged community member to help empower yourself as you make your way through the government information data landscape. And also I like to point out that landscape, it doesn't necessarily change. So I need to give you tools to be able to navigate it. I tell my students when I meet with them or community members, the way that this is organized, the way that governments, collect and publish this information, it is what it is. So we're going to do our best to give you tools to navigate it. All right, and so that just flows into what our session outcomes are. One, I want to make sure you leave here today feeling that you know how to get started. If you've got a data or a statistical question, you're not like, where the heck do I start? I feel so overwhelmed. I'm hoping to get us past that with a couple of just, easy tools for everyone it's open, you don't have to be affiliated with a particular academic institution or with an organization. That you're aware of the government information data landscape, and that you know a minimum of 3 approaches to finding and accessing government data and statistics. And like I said, we have a whole lot to cover today. So, I would be remiss if I didn't, touch on how to cite data and how to do proper data management. But I also realize that maybe a lot of you are not going to be doing like deep research and, conducting your own surveys and joining it with government data. So we may, if we're out of time, we may just kind of skip through that. But I would like to let you know that I've built this presentation in such a way that it can be a reference tool for you. So you'll get a copy of all of the slides. So I've laid it out in a way that you can kind of go back and use this as a toolkit and dive deeper into some topics that we're not going to be able to cover in much detail today, or anything that we might need to just kind of skim over. All right, so I'm going to skip showing this video. It's a great video. It's from the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, or ICPSR. These folks are like just awesome and amazing people who work at kind of what we in libraries call like the gold standard for social science data archiving. And they have a lot of great tools to help support students and researchers around understanding data, how to manage data, how to access, how to find it, all that good stuff. And so one thing I, wanted to be clear about is that there is actually a difference when we say data and statistics. And, everyone always says, oh, isn't it just all data? I know in the popular press, everyone says data. In this presentation, we'll use the two terms interchangeably, but there actually is a distinction. And so I recommend, on your own time, come back and watch this great video. This is one of the data librarians at ICPSR, and she kind of breaks it down. And she uses cats and chocolate. So if you like cats and you like chocolate, or you like both, this is a great 2-minute video, really short for you to watch. My test audience yesterday noted that there was some delay and lag on their end with the video, so I don't want to frustrate people and put you through it. So basically, this slide like kind of summarizes what the data librarian in that video gets at, is that there is a difference between data and statistics. And typically when we're talking about data, we're looking at raw inputs for statistical analysis, and statistics are what we typically see. Like if you open the newspaper and you see a chart or a graph or percentages reported out, that's usually what we're finding. And when people say, I need data, generally this is what they're looking for. I also recommend starting with statistics because it's easier to find, and they've also done some analysis and summarization for you that maybe that's all you need. So if you need kind of a percentage or a total number, or something laid out on a map like we saw at the beginning, statistics are really a good way to go. And I've also given you a recommended resource. You'll see these on a number of slides, where you can go and get even more detail on these terms and explain it. The UC Merced Library Guide, I really like the way they've laid it out and explained everything. All right, open data. This is a term I want us to all be familiar with because I actually use it as a search term. And so simply put, it's publicly available data that can be universally and readily accessed, used, and redistributed free of charge. So I'm going to do just a real high level, like federal and state legal landscape as to why this is so. So way back in 2009, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was passed, and that required all agencies, whatever level, city, county, state, to report out as part of their transparency and accountability of using these funds, to publicly post how the funds were being used, right? So the general public could see that they were receiving money in their jurisdictions, and this is how it was being used, right? So that started out, and they established a portal called data.gov. And then that was kicking around. A lot of cities and a lot of counties started, putting up their own open data portals in order to be compliant with the requirements of ARRA. We had a lot of civic tech companies starting to move into that space to build these kind of off-the-shelf open data portals. So a lot of the data that you're going to see in open data portals, especially from cities and counties, was data that was required about this kind of reporting out of how they were using these funds. And then fast forward to today, a lot of cities and counties are seeing that it is to their advantage to actually put other types of data about their cities, about the county, and make it readily available to folks. So when we're thinking about looking for especially local data, this term open data or open data portal is a key term to always have kind of at your fingertips when you're looking for it. And again, I've left you with kind of a trail of information that you can go back if you're interested in learning more about the policy side of this. So I've got from federal down to cities. And then if you're interested in doing some curriculum, more training on working with open data, this data equity for Main Street curriculum is really great. And that was actually, I believe, the California State Library and Washington State Library came together with grant funding to put that together. And so I just want to pause again on this concept of open data. And so I'm showing this particular paragraph from California. It's actually from the State Administrative Manual to raise your awareness about our state's commitment to open data. And knowing that this policy exists, I hope will give you kind of the support and knowledge about your right to access data, and know that California works within this open data framework. So, at the state level, there is this, at least on paper, this commitment to making state government agencies data available. Metadata, one of my favorite terms, technical term. You may hear about it, you may hear it, kind of tossed around. And what does it really mean in this context? Quite simply put, it's data about data. That's maybe not super helpful in describing it, but really it's the structured administrative or descriptive information, technical information or data about how the data was collected, how you can use it, what do the variables mean. So it's all that detailed information that are going to help you better understand what it is you're looking at. Even in a table, if you're looking at a statistical table, you will typically have a table title. They will give you values. Oftentimes there's footnotes that will explain where did they get the statistics from, what agency, a URL. That's all metadata, right? So it's helping to contextualize and provide you with more information about the data that you're working with, because you don't want to go in just kind of blind with this stuff. You really do need to understand what the variables mean, what the population size was, all of that. And you may come across, when you are working with, raw data, you should be seeing things like data dictionaries, code books, descriptions. Licenses are important, so you know how you can remix, reuse, and share that information. And then I've left you with this nice article from IBM on what is metadata. All right, and just to drive that home, we're going to take a look at this particular data set in the California Open Data Portal. And so here you can see we know what agency is responsible for it. There's information here. We can learn more about them. They've got the license way down at the bottom of your screen. It's open public domain. That's great. It's not copyrighted. We can see this additional description, so we have a better sense of what is this, how is this data being used, who's collecting it, what other data are included with it. And we also see here that there's a dashboard if we were to go and look for it. So let's say we don't just want this flat file here, this Excel file, we just want something where we can go and do some easy querying, get the statistics. We've found out how to do that. There's also a data dictionary here to explain the variables. And we've got a very helpful report that's going to give you additional insight. And you can see how the agency reports out these statistics. How do they talk about it? What is important to them? How are they using this data in practice? And that can be very important for understanding the particular issue of, say, safe drinking water in your communities. And then lastly, we have this table down here, and this is kind of a standard thing if you're in the California Open Data Portal. They're going to make sure that every data set has this kind of information about the access level, if there's any rights restrictions. And the most important thing, I should have circled it. I don't know if you can see where my mouse is. There is a program contact email. One of your approaches to finding state and local data is contacting an agency. So it's great that they make it very easy for you to get in touch with somebody in this open data portal. All right, just taking a quick look. Okay, great. Great. Okay, just taking a look at the chat. I'm not going to go into detail here about research data, methods, and software, but it's always good for you to be aware there's specific types of methods, qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, and that there's statistical software that you may be using if you are working with those raw data sets and not just the statistics. And so I just want you to have been, for those of you that this might be new for, that you've at least seen these terms and you've seen these types of statistical software packages. A lot of what we work with, you can pull it into Excel and, make your own summary statistics off of that. So, I don't want you to, be looking at this and be like, gosh, I can only work with data if I know how to work with one of these fancy and expensive statistical software packages. You can get a long way with Excel and even Google Sheets. And again, I've given you a couple of additional resources if you really want to dive in and have a better understanding of what these different types of methods are. And then lastly, these are terms that we tend to use in libraries when we're talking about data. So you may hear me say them today throughout the presentation, but we have things like discovery. So that's where you're kind of out there looking for it. And I tend to like using the word discovery because it's not just a straight, one line, you plug in a search term and boom, you get to what you're looking for. Oftentimes, navigating the landscape, you're going to need to do multiple types of searches and approaches. You need to read the information and then take that nugget of information to help you move on to the next phase of trying to suss out where the statistics and the data are. So it really is kind of that discovery process. And access, we've got like once you've discovered it, can you actually use it? Can you make sense of it? Storage and backup, those are things that you maybe want to considering. If you found, what you're looking for, how are you going to make sure that you can get back to it easily and not have to recreate that online search? And in libraries, especially, we're really concerned with data archives and repositories in order to ensure long-term preservation of this information, right? I mean, we hope that governments are going to be good stewards of their data and of their information. However, our present times, we're seeing where data is being actually removed from federal agency websites. So there is that's happening. And so it's important for other organizations like libraries and like data archives to kind of care and be engaged in this area to make sure that it is well preserved. And at the state and the local level, in many cases, they may not have the funding, the infrastructure, and the mission to do that. So a lot of times that's why academic libraries try to collect these data sets or these statistical publications so we can ensure that it will persist for 50, 60, 100 years. All right, so I've got a question for everybody. Where do data and statistics come from? Just off the top of your head, you just got this question thrown at you. What is your first reaction? Go ahead and pop that in the chat if you have an idea. Awesome. Yes, lived experience, the census, the metadata, absolutely. Everything collected. Great. I didn't even need to write these next two slides because you already have a really good idea. Yep, surveys, state agencies. So I've kind of put, the way I organize it, and this is how I organize it, it makes sense to me, and hopefully it'll make sense for you, is we've got governments, and that's any jurisdiction, right? That could be international, it could be other nations, their national governments. We've got industry, we've got academia, we've got the non-governmental organization space. And in there, I include like advocacy organizations, community-based organizations, think tanks, policy groups, all of that kind of, that's what I put into NGOs. And then a lot of you said, everywhere, everything, observations. So yes, people, earth, atmosphere, space, right? So this is where it comes from. And then what types of things, you all got this really well, right? That administrative records. Now, for those who may not be familiar, when we say administrative records, that basically means if you think about when you go to register to vote, you fill out a form, right? And that form goes to a state agency, and they take that information, they put it into a database, and then that's what forms, the voter rolls, right? So that's an administrative record. There could be other types of forms or other types of engagement, like this transactional data, that could also be kind of part of the administrative data. Like if you pay your property tax bill, right, there's information that is being collected by the county tax collector, and that may also flow into the county tax assessor's office, some of that information. But also, if you think about if you call a 211 line, I don't know how many of you have a 211 or a 311 in your cities or counties, and you need to report a problem, there's that transactional data. 911 calls, there's a lot of that's administrative and transactional data too. So governments do collect a lot of that. Same thing with censuses and surveys. So the types of places where we get data from over here on the left side, that tends to be where governments are getting their data from. And then we have over here on the right side, we've got polls, interviews, focus groups, text and images. Social media is a really big one. I work at UC Berkeley. I've worked at UCLA and other academic institutions, and researchers really, are using not just one, say social media. They may be using social media, but they may be using census data and linking that. We also have things like systems and software. So I always think a lot about the credit card data or cash register data that's out there. Observations and experiments, absolutely. This is one quick slide. I'm just going to throw it up there. That I want people to be aware of is that a lot of cities nowadays, especially, I think a lot of this is already in place. There was this thing called the Internet of Things. You may have read about that a lot, maybe like in the mid 2000s. And so a lot of this is like sensors and different types of monitors that cities have put in place to observe, say, pavement cameras. That's a really good one, or, different infrastructure monitoring. So there's actually a lot of data being collected out there on things that you may not even think about through this like giant sensor network. How easily accessible all of that is. This tends to fall into more administrative information, but I like you to be aware of it because as you're interacting with your built and natural environments, there's still a lot of data collection happening out there. Whether or not you may need that and how you get it, that just depends. I'm not going to go into great detail at this point on how to do that, but some of these approaches can help you navigate that if you find yourself needing that information. The other thing that I want to cover in this section is in terms of like the overall landscape is to be aware of the jurisdictions of government, right? We have federal, we have state, we have local, which kind of branches out into county, which usually is an extension of state government, as well as city, and there's regional, there's special districts and such. But oftentimes, a federal or a state agency is going to be the agency that you're going to go to for finding information about your city. And here's some reasons why. I take the example of the census. The census is constitutional, is required through the Constitution. We're supposed to have a census of the population every 10 years. The Census Bureau has blossomed and grown beyond that, and they do a lot of data collection on population, housing, demographics, and such. And they are really who's doing it for the United States. It is very costly and expensive to do these, just to run this type of a census, and then to do the data cleaning and then analyze it and then publish it and make it accessible for you. So, every city, if you're wondering like, well, why doesn't my city do its own census? It's too costly. And why would you when the Census Bureau does it? So that's usually, what I really like to drive home the importance of the US Census Bureau, even at the very local level, because you're going to get a lot of those demographics, socioeconomic, how long does it take people to drive to work types of questions, right, are going to come from the census. And there's also the American Community Survey. There's also mandated reporting. So oftentimes there's certain types of data that is being collected at the local level, but the local agencies aren't the ones that are doing anything more than collecting it. They then funnel it upwards to, say, the state or a federal agency. A really good example of this is the crime statistics that go up to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and get reported out in a really nice, statistical publication that has been published. It's called Crime in the United States. It's been published for a very long time. There's the same thing with some of the disease outbreaks and other health kind of reporting. It's not to say that you can't go to the local agency to ask about that. If you want to, you can. But sometimes the quickest way to get to the statistics, at least, is to, find out, where is this, who's responsible for collecting and then ultimately publishing it. And then there might be funding requirements. So federal funds are going directly to a city agency or a county agency, then they're going to report directly back to that federal agency, and that's where the statistics will get published. And in some cases, that may also be where you need to start if you have to talk to somebody about those statistics. Great. We're about halfway through. I can hear our campanile on the Berkeley campus chiming. So we're doing pretty good on time. So this is a framework that I like to give folks to think about when you're starting your data quest or your statistics quest. Some things to think about because it's going to impact, how you navigate the different sources and approaches, and also give you an idea that it's not all going to be available in exactly the way you want it, right? So think about what time period you want. And these items here, these concepts that I've put an asterisk next to, I feel that those are things that you can pretty easily kind of take a minute to think about. What is it that I really want? What is my geography? Okay, I want it at the city level, or I'm really interested in finding out information about my school district, right? And then what kind of variables are you looking for? So what kind of information are you trying to find? And then what is your date period, right? So am I looking for just the most recent that has been published? I work with a lot of students and researchers who they're going back, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 100 years. And so, getting that out at the beginning and understanding like what is your temporal coverage can be very helpful as you start to engage with the sources. And also it will help manage your expectations if you start coming up with not a lot of great results as you're going through your search. And then just to drive home the example of geography, of like asking yourself, what level of geography am I ideally looking for? Again, this is from the census. They collect all of these different geographic levels. And so depending on what it is you're trying to work on, what your research question is, if you're trying to engage with a particular, say, city council member to talk about a policy that's, coming forth before city council, and you want to either advocate for it or make a claim or against it, you want to oppose it. If you need to get demographic information, you may need to focus in on a very granular population. So again, just having a general sense of how government agencies organize their cities, their counties, their regions is very helpful. And again, I like to pull from the Census Bureau because they have the most diverse and granular geography available. So just some challenges. I don't want to scare people off with this. I think it's just, I'm trying to help manage expectations because I know it can be challenging and frustrating. These are actual quotes from folks from other workshops that I've done along this topic. And basically a lot of people are like, I just don't know where to start and where do I ask questions if I've got them? And it can feel pretty overwhelming. And it's just difficult to know what was available at any point in time and who has it. And all I can say is yes, yes, and yes. And yes, there are time delays with data releases as well. And that really is kind of the reality. I'll also say that I've put together this list of challenges as well. And I think the biggest thing, just to help manage your expectations and to maybe let you know it's okay. It is hard. It is because statistics and data, especially from state and local government agencies, it's all over the place. Like there's not one nice, neat database I can point everyone to and say, go forth. It's all in there. It isn't. It's everywhere. And it could be with the agency. It might be with, a non-governmental organization may put up a portal. It might be in a publication. So this next point. It's not all online. You could be Googling till the cows come home. If you're looking for stuff from 2000, statistics from 2000, it may be in a statistical publication that was never digitized and you can't get to it. You may have to go to a library or whomever has that, or go directly to the city to get that information. Again, not all administrative data that gets collected ends up published or readily available. And so again, you may have to take that step of actually working with the agency, calling them up and asking them about it. And then also just to be aware that, especially at the local level, a lot of cities and counties, they're just under-resourced. They don't have the budget, and they don't have staff to be, spinning up a really complex and fulsome, open data portal, right? So it may just be a couple people who are there to help field questions when people are looking for specific information from the cities. Again, not well archived, not well described. Again, to that point, other government agencies might be responsible for it. And the other thing I like to point out here is that oftentimes government agencies, they're not collecting about information in a way that includes specific cultural, ethnic, gender, or social groups for a variety of reasons. And it's frustrating because you might want the data broken out by gender and not just by male and female. You may want a more expansive, breakdown of gender, right? And it just isn't that way. And again, governments are going to collect what they're required to collect or what they're mandated to collect. And if you think about the laws around, how race is defined in California or in the US, that's implemented at the state and the local levels. The same thing with gender. It's just a male and female collection. And so there's any number. We could have an entire session discussing and unpacking this particular issue. So now we're going to move into our approaches to finding and accessing data and statistics. So I'm just curious, for those of you who have done this, what did you do to be able to find your statistics or your data that maybe worked fairly well for you? If you want to pop that in the chat. Used Google site. Yep. So you use that domain specific search, looked at state agency websites, reaching out to organizations. Oh yeah, I love it. Message the analyst at the Census Bureau who handles the data I need. Absolutely. These are great. So again, for those of you that you may be newer to, looking for data and statistics. Our colleagues here in the chat have got some really great experience that they're sharing. So do take note of that. And it also helps to reinforce my checklist that I have for you. I like checklists. And this is how, when I organize myself, if I get a question about, looking for some, let's say, I don't know, housing mortgage data or something, and I'm just not familiar with the topic, right? I kind of have this checklist of these are all the places that I'm going to go to check. The first one I use may work and I may, find exactly what I'm looking for, but I may need to use all of these that are on my checklist. I may need to use a couple. I may need to go back and redo and reuse a couple of these approaches. So it really just depends on, once you start your search, what you're finding, and you assess and determine, okay, can I try a different approach on this checklist? You also have to balance, what is your time frame too? You may not have all the time in the world to go through and do a literature review and to check all these data repositories and so maybe your quickest path to getting to the data is I figured out the agency. So you use the agency approach and I'm going to call them and say, this is what I'm looking for. Can you help me? So that's just something to bear in mind with this checklist, but this is a way just to kind of lay it all out there. Here's your toolkit for doing this work. So actually, oops, let me go back here. You'll notice some of these are in gold here. I think I plan to just do some demos of those that are in gold. If we have extra time and there aren't a lot of questions, then I can go back and pick up some of these others, but we just won't have time to go through each of these with a demo. So that's why I've highlighted these, so you know that this is what we're covering in the session. However, I have slides for all of these. All right, library research guides. Why go to a guide when I could just Google it? Well, that's true. You can try that. And we do have like search engine and like Google tools for searching. But I like to point out that librarians, we spend a lot of time getting these questions, and we like helping people to navigate statistical and data questions. So you don't have to be, enrolled at USC to use this library, the statistics and data for California and Los Angeles guide. These guides are really great because we build them with the intent to give you context and an explanation, give you an idea of how far back do they go, sometimes even who to contact, right? So I really like to point people to these because quite frankly, I use them often when I'm trying to, if I'm working with a new topic and I'm not quite sure where to start and I want to get, say just the lay of the land. And so here you can see this is the one from USC. Most of these up in here, they're all freely available, right? And you may discover some things that you had no idea about. Now, the one thing I will say when you are using a library guide that's coming from, say, an academic institution, you may run into tools that are licensed and limited only for those institutions. That's okay, but just want you to be mindful of it. But a lot of times, because it is government information, federal, state, if there is a data portal or a database or, a data set, it's freely and openly available to you. So it'll be here. And so then I just wanted to give you some quick web strategies for doing this. And so if you feel like it, go ahead and open up a tab on your browser. And I'm going to go ahead and click on this. I already have this search queued up, but type in Research Guide Voter Registration Statistics. So I'm going to start using this example of looking for voter registration and election data and statistics in California. And you can also see where your key terms, so try searching using Research Guide and try searching using LibGuide and compare your results. You'll notice you'll get some similar results and they will be different. But this starts to surface potentially useful. There's sources of voting data, guides to help you better understand who collects voting data, where to go for it. So if you're new to a particular statistical topic, again, this is why using these types of resources are great. And I'm going to do this one here, LibGuide Voter Registration by Cities in California. And you'll start to see that maybe a particular government agency starts popping up in your results. So that's the other thing, is you want to make sure you're taking a look at your results and seeing, is there a common government agency that I could use? Let's take a look at this. Claremont Colleges. I'm going to do Control F voter. Down here, we can see, California Department of State voter registration statistics. This is helpful, it goes back to 1999. So just this couple of quick searches, I've identified a state agency. Yes, thank you, Heather. The .edu limiter can be very helpful too. So instead of just doing LibGuide or Research Guide, you can put site.edu as well. Add that to your toolkit. Utilize the information that, we work on, we in libraries work on and put out there for you. Okay, the agency approach. A lot of you indicated that you call the agency, and that's great. And I, when I work with students, I, say, do you have a phone? Are you comfortable talking on it? Because depending on what it is you're looking for, you may need to just call the agency, because they're the ones that are responsible for collecting it and publishing it. And if you're not easily finding it, you need to go to them. Now, at the state and the local level, you may get, bounce to some other, people. Usually what I have found is at the state level, if I can find the right agency, They will get me to the right person. I leave a voicemail and someone gets back to me within a couple of days. And then you have the opportunity to have a conversation about what it is you're looking for. And then you get the expert on the other end of the line to help explain why they have that data, why they don't have that data, or why only some of the data may be available, or, oh, hey, here's our website where we publish those statistics. Maybe it's buried. Web design can vary. Sometimes things are easy to surface in a Google search, sometimes they're not. If you go directly to the agency website and you try searching, you may be able to surface it that way. And so that's why I have here this website excavation where you can browse and use the search box, right, to find that. So I'm going to skip doing this demo because it sounds like a lot of you have done this already. And I'm going to go to this demo of data.census.gov because I want to make sure that you leave here feeling comfortable with getting into data.census.gov and looking up information at the city level. So let's take a look at renters in San Diego City. And thank you. That's an excellent point. So if everyone would take a minute and take a look at Michelle's post in the chat, this is important. I work in a public university. I'm a librarian. I don't have that limitation. But this is also an important point that I actually didn't put, well, I have people as an approach, right? So getting in touch with other librarians. And so oftentimes there are libraries and librarians, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, they have a library and librarians that you can definitely reach out to. The California Energy Commission definitely does. So yes, that is a great, when you're talking about people and reaching out to the agency, finding out if they have a library or librarian or archive that you can reach out to is a great way to get in touch with somebody. So thank you for posting that, Michelle. Okay, so what we wanted to do here is, let's say we want to find out like how many people rent in the city of San Diego. And this is a great way if you want to find out just some, high level socioeconomic demographic information about your city. So I'm going to say renters in San Diego. And yes, it is as simple as that. The census and working with census data, there is a lot of complexity and a lot to know, but I like to empower people with just getting started. Do a simple search like this. Let me move my window over a little bit more. Now, if you notice here, we've got San Diego County, but we wanted city. So is there a way that we can maybe limit? And you can try this for San Diego City, try it for your city. There we go. Now, I have to say, if you would have tried this maybe a year or two ago, the search engine behind this data.census.gov may not have been so intuitive to be able to just take that search and revise it and give you the city information. Oftentimes, I go in and I would drill down into all of these different facets for the data. But if you're looking for, again, a quick statistic, here's how we can do that. And it surfaces this first table here. So I'm going to go into that. And you can see there's a lot of different information. So we're looking at city. We've got occupied housing units. And hopefully I can scroll over. That's the other thing. Sometimes the challenge is once you've found the resource, navigating it. And here we go. We've got how many renter occupied housing units. We've got a total here, and you've got some percentages over here, right? They give you a bit of a breakdown by race and age, educational attainment, and such. All right. So again, I can't emphasize enough, knowing about the census, knowing about data.census.gov is really important and can be very helpful in just getting started with your data quest. I'm not going to go over public records or sunshine requests, but just know that sometimes you may find yourself having to engage with that. depending on, what you find out from the agency. Again, not all information, because if it's part of a record, a city or a county record, it may not be something that they're just going to put out there. You have to go through a process to request it. And then I want to look at some open data portals. And it sounds like many of you have done that. Just checking time. Okay. So what I would like to do is let's go back to our Google search. And I would like you to pick your city or your county. I'm always curious because I find more cities seem to have open data portals than cities, or excuse me, more cities than counties have open data portals, but it's always a moving target. So if you'd like to check for your county or your city, just see if you have one. If you know you already have one, then pick another city or a county. And I'm going to go back up to the top and see. I think we had a lot of people from Sacramento. You can put the word portal in. If that doesn't work, take portal off. The search engine is going to interpret things, slightly different. It's easy. You don't get charged. Back in the day, way, way back in the day, when librarians would run searches in databases, there were actual charge for it. We don't have that. So here's our city of Sacramento open data. So if you're really interested in local data and what's coming out of your city, my recommendation is, one afternoon or one evening when, you don't have a whole lot to do, or you want to, get your brain working in a different way, come to this and take a look to see what do they have in here. What is available? Okay, so what is under budget and finance? What is under permits and planning? Remember, I mentioned there's a lot of transactional data that gets made available. So here's that, 311 calls that you can look at. How far back does it go? So this is, again, when we talk about all of the metadata that's being collected about the data sets, we've got that here in this particular portal. You click on that. I'm familiar with the company that runs this type of portal. Now, there's too many records. So this is something where you may just want to download it. I think if you, let's see if we can scroll in, if that's going to change it. A lot of these will give you the ability to map. Let's look at the full details. There we go. So this will tell us a little bit more about the data. This is the 311 incident. It's real time and updated. This data set contains that was last updated, right? So now you know when the most recent was. And if we take a look at the data table, I tend to prefer tables than maps. You can get this list. And you can see, and again, this is, if you were to think of somebody on the other end of the 311 call, this is, what they're inputting into their form when they get a call. Now, maybe it's missing a lot of information. Maybe you want more details, and that's the point at which you may have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody who's in charge of this particular data set. All right, California has a wonderful open data portal. I'm just curious. I know I don't have a little chat icon, but you can either use a show of hands or just, put a thumbs up in the chat. How many of you have seen the California open data portal or used it or used any of the data sets there? All right. You're on it right now. Very good. So we've got seasoned users. So again, just like the benefit of having these open data portals, you notice they all start to have a certain look and feel. They function in similar ways. You can explore by kind of these large groupings. If we went into natural resources, for example, or economy and demographics, I'm going to pick natural resources. If you're really interested in drinking water, you could do a search. And you get to browse and see what's available, right? So this is, if you do have time to be able to get in there and browse and see what is readily available, that's great. This also, you can start to see, okay, what type of, we want to look at the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, basin. This will help you identify those different agencies. We talked about that, and who you can get in contact with. So oftentimes these open data portals, the metadata are really helpful to getting you connected with the people who can help you better navigate the data and how to find and access it. The other thing that I like to point out too is that not all agencies are putting their data into these portals. So just because it's not in an open data portal, that don't think that it doesn't exist. Again, we have to think about going back to those government agencies. I'm not going to go through the GIS data, but there is also geospatial data out there. The California State Geoportal is really great. So if you are doing mapping and need those types of data sets, they are available to you. And if you want to find out more about it, we've got that LibGuide. The last thing I want to do here in terms of a demo is looking for election statistics by city. So now that we've talked a lot about data, about thinking about like our geography or time period, what do you think is problematic with my search that I have here? California election statistics by city. I mean, I've got some decent results here, especially this California election. Cities don't gather data, but do they? Missing dates, very good. Well, it depends on the election. So remember, if you think about how elections are run, typically election statistics are reported upwards to the California Secretary of State, right? But if we look at, and again, it depends on what are we trying to find? Like, do we want to just find, results by city for, president, for the state, all of that. So what we've got here, let's say we do want to find election statistics for San Diego. So we have a specific city. I'm not even going to say county. And so we do have election results here. And so this is where you want to get into your level of specificity. So what are we looking for? If you're looking for candidate races, so the mayor of San Diego, here's your results. So I know someone was saying that in California that results are published only out at the county level. And that's true. If we went back to our original search for statistics, we see this voter participation statistics coming from the California Secretary of State, which we are now finding this. If we're looking for voting registration and election statistics, Secretary of State is our agency, right? And you go in here and you can get that voter participation. If you were to go through and take a look, let's see what else we have in terms of election statistics. We've got other, I'm looking for, where is my, Let's see if we do, here we are. That was a special. So if we look here at this general election, we're going to get to a publication called Statement of Vote, and we get to the complete statement of vote. And here are the registration, participation, statewide general, get our summary pages, so on and so forth. So a lot of detailed information in here. I'm not going to scroll through there. Don't want to make you sick. But anyways, that's just to show you that really you need to be specific in terms of what it is you're looking for. And again, driving home that fact, you may be looking at the city, you may be looking at the state level. I'm not going to go through any of this. And as I said, I see we're almost out of time, and I'm sorry I'm not leaving a ton of time for questions. I'm leaving you with resources on how to properly cite data and statistics. So I've built you kind of just a template and then given you an example to help you cite it, because citing data and statistics in this way is going to help for people finding what you've used, as well as leaving a breadcrumb trail and making it more reusable. And then for those of you who are working with data and doing data management, if you're bringing in government data, your own survey data, I would like to make sure that you are aware of care and fair being a way that you are properly stewarding, managing, collecting, organizing, describing, and sharing it. That's also ethically. CARE comes from the Indigenous Data Governance group in terms of thinking about Indigenous peoples and their data and what they need in order to ensure that any data collected about them or by them is stewarded and used in an ethical manner. All right, that's it. We came in right at the at the nose. It's just 2:30.